Dr. Mark Israel, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get to it. The world is obviously focusing on the global COVID-19 pandemic. When it comes to cancer research, are you seeing anything that's making an impact on coronavirus?
Well, thanks so much, Robin. I appreciate so much the opportunity to be here, and many thanks to all of you for joining this webinar. Before I focus on the specifics of cancer research in the time of the coronavirus epidemic and talk about the scientific themes that Robin alluded to, I wanted to say just a few words about these diseases, which on the surface would seem to be totally different entities. For example, we're painfully aware that as a result of many characteristics of the coronavirus, but especially its spread through respiratory tract fluids and the presence of the virus in uninfected individuals, that it's highly contagious. That's clearly not the case when we think of cancer. Rather, cancer, though frequently linked to environmental exposures, including viruses, a theme to which I'll return later this evening, cancer rises from within. Cancer is a disorder of the genes in a single cell. Genes important for stimulating normal growth in the infant and normal growth in tissues like skin that are replaced throughout adulthood are overexpressed in cancer and stimulate cell division at the wrong time in the wrong place. And genes that encode the brakes on growth, that cause us all to have ears that stop short of our shoulders and fingers that do not drag on the ground, those genes are damaged in cancer and the brakes do not work. Too much cell growth occurs, and the most fundamental of biological requirements, namely that organisms made up of many different cells, of many different cell types, must be in perfect coordination of growth among every single cell. If a single cell grows in the wrong place at the wrong time, cancer can occur. Clearly, COVID-19 and cancer are fundamentally different disorders. So changing from conducting cancer research to conducting research on COVID-19 is a bit like turning an ocean-going tanker, not generally considered easy. And you can easily imagine that first, coronavirus and cancer research require clearly different or at least additional areas of world-class expertise. Also, research in these areas requires highly specialized resources, not readily available at the turn of a key. For example, if you need a mouse model of human cancer, say breast cancer, to do your research, it requires years to develop. And think of this, a common starting point for viral research would be to secure isolated facilities to grow large amounts of highly concentrated virus, not something a cancer researcher would have access to. And one can reasonably expect that sometimes cancer research and coronavirus research would require different types of equipment. Cancer research might need expansive multi-million-dollar machines to rapidly determine the DNA sequence of numerous genes, while cancer research might need sophisticated microscopes to visualize what viruses contact on the cell surface before entering the cell. So in the end, much research is either cancer research or viral research with little overlap. But fortunately, there are some areas of overlap. Envision two circles representing either cancer research or coronavirus research. One yellow on the left, one blue on the right. And as they start to overlap, moving together, an area of green emerges, identifying areas of the circle that they hold in common. There are, in fact, many shared themes, the understanding of which has implications to help with efforts to approach both the coronavirus epidemic and cancer, which I would also offer is also epidemic. Think of this. This year, over 600,000 Americans will die of cancer, and 1,000 more Israelis will too. This number of cancer deaths is many, many-fold the number of deaths projected from COVID-19. For sure, cancer is an epidemic. Yet while we have confidence that eventually the COVID epidemic will pass, we can expect that similar numbers of cancer deaths next year will occur, and the year after that, and the year after that, if research is not pursued. So what are some of the shared themes, an understanding of which provides insights into cancer as well as coronavirus infection? And I want to start with a couple that are undoubtedly on your mind. For example, tests for early detection. You cannot watch the news without hearing about the importance of testing during an epidemic. And early detection of cancer is key for a good outcome. Catch it before it spreads, and the chances for effective therapy are significantly increased. And in some types of cancer, we have surveillance strategies that provide information on early cancers that allow us to intervene and stop the process in its tracks. Ones you may be very familiar with are colonoscopies for colon cancer, mammograms for breast cancer. But the major line of investigation now in cancer early detection is the development of tests that can detect either tumor cells or unique products of tumor cells circulating in your body. It's hard to imagine, but research labs are now able to detect the rarest of tumor cells or products of tumor cells circulating in your blood long before any other means of detection can identify the presence of a cancerous tumor. And before long, it's likely such tests will be used to screen large populations of people for emerging cancers. Dr. Nama Giva-Zartowski at the Technion, whose work is funded by ICRF to study how bacteria in your gut can influence your body's ability to prevent the development of cancer, is a researcher who has taken that experience and transformed it into something important for COVID virus. Based on her work, her laboratory developed experience in the detection of minuscule amounts of biologic material in samples derived from individual patients. And with that work in mind, and building on that expertise, she developed a test based on quite a novel laboratory technology called reverse transcribed loop-mediated isothermal amplification for the detection of RNA molecules. An RNA molecule which distinguishes this coronavirus from any other. That RNA molecule does not exist anywhere else in nature, certainly not in our bodies. And if present, it reveals the evidence of a viral infection. Importantly, the test she developed can be applied directly to nose and throat swabs, even saliva, and examined directly. Other testing strategies require that the swab or whatever human sample is taken is shipped to a lab to be chemically treated and the viral RNA marker extracted and purified. To study how bacteria in your gut can influence your body's purification step is required. Dr. Giva-Zartowski tested this protocol on over 180 suspected patients and compared its results to the standard laboratory methods for virus detection. The test identified 99% of cases that had medium or high concentrations of virus. Now, this is a rather small-sized experiment for something of this complexity, but it was an exciting start. And because the proposed test provided results on the spot and can detect coronavirus in saliva without further treatment, it allows for the simple and continuous surveillance of entire communities, even entire populations. And because the proposed with that principle in mind, and that principle established, further developmental work led to an inexpensive home test that can detect coronavirus in under an hour. And in contrast to the many rather sensationalistic stories you read about, this test is currently awaiting approval from the Israel Ministry of Health. Another topic, and one on everyone's mind, is the development of a protective vaccine. People often do not think about this, but something like 15 to 20% of human cancers are caused by viruses. And in some cases, we've developed vaccines that effectively protect the population from cancer caused by these viruses. For example, viruses cause the most common forms of liver cancer, some types of lymphoma, some genital tract tumors in men and women, some cancers of the head and neck. Viruses cause Kaposi's sarcoma, Burkitt's lymphoma, and several other tumors as well. Now, recognizing that viruses can cause a specific cancer is of great importance for many reasons, but a key reason is that it means vaccines which are directed against microbes such as those viruses can be useful for some of these cancer-causing viruses, to treat some of these cancer-causing viruses. And so we have vaccines. The best known of these is the so-called HPV virus vaccine, the human papillomavirus vaccine, which protects both men and women from various types of cancer. And there's also a hepatitis B vaccine that's effective in preventing liver cancer from hepatitis B infection, though not from hepatitis C. Now, each of these viral vaccines have been built upon more than a decade's work on the basic biology of these viruses. But such work and work ongoing to develop other antiviral vaccines have implications for coronavirus vaccines. And an example of this is the work of Professor Ronit Sachi-Fanara at Tel Aviv University. She's been funded by ICRF to study how melanoma, the most aggressive type of skin tumor, which spreads to the brain, might be prevented. In the course of that work, funded by ICRF, she developed a novel nano vaccine for melanoma. The name nano vaccine refers to the use of a nanotechnology approach to solving the problem. And nano refers to the size of the material used as a treatment. Nanoscale particles are generally so small that they typically pass into cells through holes in the cell's protective membrane that other therapeutics might not be able to breach. Viruses themselves are in fact just that small, and a coronavirus particle, which could be called a nanoparticle, is about 150 nanometers in diameter. How small is that? Well, the head of a pin is 1,000,000 nanometers in diameter. So you can line up many thousands of coronavirus particles across the diameter of the head of a pin. And in turn, that corresponds to millions of coronavirus particles that could populate the head of a pin without any overlap. Now, this is a bit off point, and I'm coming back to the nano vaccine, but keep this in mind. Many millions of coronavirus particles on the head of a pin. Keep that in mind when you think about the latest estimate that 1,000 virus particles are enough to make you sick. 1,000 virus particles make you sick. Millions of virus particles sit flat on the top of a pin. But I digress. So in the course of working on a nano vaccine for melanoma, Dr. Sachi-Fanara recognized the opportunity to apply these principles to coronavirus and now has developed a nano vaccine that will soon be tested for protection against coronavirus. This sort of flexibility and innovative thinking has the potential to save years of work. And beyond a virus, another way to prevent COVID infection would be to block the ability of viruses to infect cells. Many of us take medicine each day to treat diabetes or hypertension or high cholesterol. So the idea of high-risk individuals, indeed anyone, taking a pill a day to keep the virus away is not beyond reason. Dr. Ophel Mandelbaum at Hebrew University is supported by ICRF to study a molecule that tumors make and that suppresses the body's protective immune reactions that could fight off the tumor. This tumor-produced inhibitor actually floats from the tumor cell to the cells of the immune system where it binds to those immune cells and thereby inhibits their function. Blocking the binding of this inhibitor to the body's tumor-fighting immune cells is a key goal of Dr. Mandelbaum's work. Think of that. Building a drug that blocks the binding of something that inhibits the immune response to a tumor. And you can easily imagine that doing that requires knowledge of how one molecule can bind to another on the surface of a cell. Well, for the coronavirus to infect us, it must get into our cells. And recently, Dr. Mandelbaum has taken the experience and knowledge gained from those studies to develop materials that can be used to inhibit the binding of coronavirus to our cells and thereby block infection. Such information is a long way from a drug, but it is the fundamental underpinning of the research needed to develop a drug that could block entry of virus into our cells, into our body. And this is another example of how cancer research and cancer research funded by the Israel Cancer Research Fund can impact coronavirus research. Now, I could go on with other examples. At ICRF, we've already identified over 30 examples of how ICRF funded cancer research in Israel either is already or can be expected to impact on COVID research. And perhaps as we learn more about how this virus causes disease, insights gained from coronavirus and COVID-19 studies will provide insights of importance for cancer. But I don't want to dwell only on the opportunities for synergies within the research being conducted and the positive effects of either cancer research on COVID research or vice versa, the potential effects of COVID research on cancer. There can be no doubt that cancer research, which I want to repeat, is the only possible way to change cancer outcomes, is at risk in the age of COVID. While COVID will pass, cancer will not. Until recently, cancer research labs in Israel were closed because of this virus, and in the US, many are still closed. Numerous cancer clinical trials, the experiments in hospitals that give patients access to the latest drugs and which are key in moving drugs from being experimental to being safe and effective in use in the general population, have been curtailed because of the epidemic. And further, it would be naive to think that the funding for COVID research will not detract from future funds available for cancer research. Further, COVID's having a terrible effect on cancer patients. Cancer patients are more susceptible to infection because of immune suppression, and cancer patients are at greater risk for having bad outcomes because of that compromised immune function. Further, cancer patients require comprehensive care that's compromised by social distancing. Nurses, social workers, therapists of all sorts are forced to spend less time with cancer patients, even while draped in protective gear. Now, I was asked to talk about cancer research in the time of coronavirus. I'd summarize my comments by saying that while no one can diminish the incredible suffering from coronavirus that we're experiencing, and few would think we should not direct all the attention possible to doing what we can to fight the virus, that invariably means decreasing efforts to focus cancer research. The impact of the COVID epidemic on cancer research has been easy to discern, but cancer research continues to provide key information and opportunities to mollify the effects of the coronavirus. So before I take questions, I want to bring us back to the importance of supporting cancer research, and especially supporting cancer research in Israel with donations to ICRF. I took this job at the end of my career because I believe that by harnessing for the benefit of cancer research, the same grit, commitment, innovation, and spirited reliance on excellence that established the state of Israel would provide mankind with the best chance possible in impacting on the suffering and death that's wrought by cancer. Of over 150 applications for funding this year, our scientific review panels consisting of more than 50 leading American and Canadian scientists identified 21 projects to be of particular importance and likely to be very impactful. ICRF currently funds over 70 different cancer research projects in Israel, and we fund more projects in Israel and more cancer research projects in Israel than any other non-governmental agency. Please keep in mind that we will fund many fewer than half the number of new cancer grants this year than we did last year because COVID has decreased the amount of money we've been able to raise. I hope that you'll consider supporting ICRF so that we can support the very best of the Israeli investigators studying cancer, and as you can see, impacting on the epidemic as well. Please keep this in mind. I know that at the end there'll be information provided for how you can donate, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Israel. We did have some questions that were coming in, and we can definitely see your passion, especially in how you summed everything up. I really appreciate that. It's coming in from you. All right, so everybody feel free to ask your questions, or if you want them to elaborate on something else on which Dr. Israel touches in what's happening with cancer research or COVID-19 research in Israel, or what he knows, what he thinks, what his experiences are. So we'll start with this one is, why do you think the saliva test isn't being used more widely?
The saliva test is not being used more widely because it hasn't been certified for general use. It's in the process of emerging from a research project to a consumer product.
Where do you see it going once it's get more established?
Well, I see at-home testing, especially at-home testing that can give almost instantaneous results, as something that should be used very, very widely. And I know that I would stock up with it in my house for routine use by visitors and even by myself until someday we have herd immunity and ways to protect the general population through immunization.
Well, we can only hope, and that's going there too. The next question is, we've spent years searching for cancer treatments and cures. How likely do you think it will be that scientists will find a vaccine for COVID-19 anytime soon? And if not soon, what's your best scientific guess?
Well, I listen to the news as you do, and we hear these conflicting estimates. It's inconceivable to me that vaccines get developed quickly. There are some huge challenges. I mean, there are reasons we don't have vaccines for many, many infectious diseases, even though people have worked on them for decades. The development of a vaccine can go on in a laboratory, and once you have a candidate, it has to be tested for safety in individuals, and then it has to be tested for efficacy. So you have to give it to a population and compare that to a population that didn't get it, and you have to wait some period of time for it to be developed. And then in terms of producing it in the US, I understand that drug companies are gearing up to produce millions and millions of doses, but that is not trivial. And you've heard, as everyone else, that even if you had millions of doses, getting it to the population is not trivial. Most recently, I've heard that there's a shortage of syringes. So it's going to be some time before we have a vaccine.
And masks and PPE and all those other things that we need too. Next question, how long do testing protocols usually take before a vaccine is ready in the general population?
Many years.
Can you elaborate a little on that?
No,
Process?
because I'm really not I've sort of referred to the steps that are involved: testing for safety, testing for efficacy. When you give a drug for hypertension, you have a population of people who are sick with something that has life-threatening potential, and it's a relatively small number of people compared to the entire population. When you start giving a single drug to huge numbers of people, you have to worry about unforeseen side effects and unforeseen adverse effects occurring in rare individuals that nonetheless are very significant. And so historically, and COVID is once in a generation kind of problem, historically, it has taken years to develop vaccines.
Okay, do you think that cancer patients are seeking less treatment during this pandemic?
Well, I have given up my practice, so I don't know the answer to that. One would think that cancer patients would be extraordinarily highly motivated to get their treatments. But I have talked to individuals who have been deeply concerned about going to the hospital to get treated because the hospital is the place where COVID infected people are most likely to be found. And so I don't know the answer to that question, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that people are delaying and avoiding intermittently treatment for cancer in order to avoid getting exposed to the virus.
Sure. On a different kind of note, the next question is, some viruses such as adeno or poliovirus are used experimentally for treatment of brain cancer. Are there other studies using viruses for cancer treatment?
No, well, let me take a step back. I don't know that entire area of cancer research that well to say there aren't, but the best example of viruses being used to treat cancer are the two that you identified.
Okay. The next question is, can you address the possible costs of a vaccine? And would it be available to all, including people of lower income?
I have no clue of what it costs to develop a vaccine, but drug companies have told us that to develop a drug, it can cost up to $1 billion from the time the research begins to the time large clinical trials are completed.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No, so
Okay.
it's not crazy that it would be in that range of cost to develop a vaccine. And as to what it would actually cost individuals in the population and who would have to pay, I mean, that's
Remains to be seen.
something I know much about.
All right, so let's go back to this. Do you feel the concentration of non-COVID is misplaced or overblown to the exclusion of other illnesses such as cancer?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
Do you feel that the concentration of COVID is misplaced or overblown to the exclusion of other illnesses such as cancer? They were making too big a deal about COVID with the proportion of people who have it versus cancer.
No, I think in terms of managing COVID, I think that's where a major focus of the world's medicine and political management should be. It's a terrible threat. In terms of continuing the momentum that's been established in common life-threatening illnesses, in particular cancer, I think that it's dangerous to allow that momentum to be lost simply because of pretty modest amounts of funding that's required.
Next question is, what can you comment on the reasons Israel continues to lead so much in the medical categories?
Well, I referred to this before. I think that Israelis excel in problem solving, and where they put their attention, whether it's desalination or a fighter jet or cancer research, I believe that their depth of commitment, ability to innovate, collaborative spirit leads to quicker outcomes than settings in which those characteristics are not common. And so this leads to a leadership position.
Next question is a little bit of a turn here. There's a melanoma, kind of similar to the last question that we were talking about with the adeno and polio virus. There's a melanoma vaccine for dogs. Did you indicate there's such a vaccine for people who are suffering from melanoma? And if not, why is there one for dogs but not people?
Well, there's not one for people. And why there's one for dogs and not for people, I'm sure I don't know. One could speculate, but I don't think that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Let's see. As a medical professional, what do you see as the most frustrating thing in the response to the pandemic, and what gives you hope?
Well, the most disappointing aspect has been the inability to organize the country's response in a manner that facilitates the best and fastest outcome. What gives me hope is the ingenuity of American and Israeli and European scientists and the depth of commitment of good people to sort this out.
Okay, well, I think we are done with our questions. So I personally thank you very much. Unless we get anything more, I'm going to give it back to Robin to wrap it up. And unless she sees something else coming in, thank you all of our people out there watching for me. And Robin, take it away.
So how would you characterize ICRF as making a difference on the ground in Israel and supporting cancer research there? What do you think has been its biggest impact?
Well, I didn't write that question, but I love getting it. As I indicated, we're funding over 70 different research projects and cancer research projects, more than any other non-governmental agency. So Israel Cancer Research Fund mediated funding is a lifeline for the conduct of what I feel is the most innovative and aggressive ongoing research. We tend to fund early stage projects and tend to fund young investigators. And that's where I feel the most impactful science is actually conducted. And I think the areas in which we are most excited are what I would call fundamental research that allows one to identify themes within the biology of cancer that haven't before been well recognized. And this sort of focus on innovation and on novelty has served the Israel Cancer Research Fund well and led to discoveries that have gone on to be studied by large cadres of people around the world, and in some cases have led to the development of new drugs. Things like Velcade and Doxil and even Gleevec are drugs that Israeli investigators funded by ICRF made critical contributions to. So I'm very enthusiastic about the impact that we're seeing now.
Well, great. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much to all of our participants. And please, for more information, go to icrfonline.org. Dr. Israel, once again, a pleasure. Sharon, you know I love working with you, and we hope to see you all at our winery tour and our J&F evening. So to all of you, a good night, be safe, and stay well.